Nobody moved for many minutes.
Atsuki, who do you think you are?
I was about to lose touch with reality when a sound brought me back to my surroundings. The three of us were startled simultaneously and looked at the hatch that had just opened. Hmm? What? Kate appeared through the hatch with a dour expression. Since he'd addressed me, I tried to stand up, but I could only support my torso with an arm.
Atsuki, did you really think you could get out of this with simple threats? Those will not work on me, so once we make it out, you can say goodbye to your normal life.
I couldn't comprehend a word of what he was saying. He'd sat on the bed and put his face really close to mine. His eyes told me that he was being serious, but I couldn't help but respond with an exaggerated frown.
Are you listening to me?
What the hell are you on about?
Stop with your facade. It all makes sense, and I know Shiraya must be working with you.
Huh? For a second I thought he might have figured out we'd hidden the Sekimeiya and had decided to blow it out of proportion.
Don't worry, Erina. I know he's been threatening you from the start. We're all locked up here, so now he can't pull one of his tricks. Earlier when I left the lobby, you were who followed me, not Sai. However, you made the others cover for you. That wasn't a smart move, idiot. I didn't realize that everything was a fabrication. You killed the first Naomi and had everyone else lie about it. That's why you made up the elevator noise, to frame me or someone else.
Are you fucking out of your mind? Why would I want to frame you if everyone else was covering for me?
Do not try to change the facts. When the second Naomi died, conveniently I ended up on floor 6 while you and everyone you'd threatened were under me. That's why you could all act as if you had an alibi for her death. You knew about the attic key and had been here already. You could have had every key from the beginning. Right, how did I ignore such suspicious behavior? You and Shiraya left the attic and didn't come back for 50 minutes, and then the Sekimeiya had mysteriously disappeared. However, you instructed Sai to immediately act suspiciously as soon as we went down to divert my attention.
Despite everything that had occurred, my bewilderment thus far couldn't compare to what I felt from the words I was hearing.
And then Isla died. You were behind that, right? You tried to make us believe that you were sleeping as it happened. How did I swallow that lie? Shiraya found the hidden passage in the storeroom. How was I so stupid? You were about to use it. Before showing up in the lobby, you came from hallway B. You were too stupid to appear from hallway A after removing the Sekimeiya from the cleaning room. No wonder you sided with Erina and wanted everyone to stay locked in here. After all, you'd hidden the Sekimeiya and could safely sleep like you were doing just now. Did you actually think any of this would work?
Are you just fucking around or are you really this dumb?
I suppose you will not give up. You too are the culprits behind this incident. Why were you in the first group of the guided visit when you've shown no interest in the gems? Now that I've learned about it, you must confess. I know you didn't attempt to threaten me individually since I work here and there's no way I'd give in to you.
I'm having a hard time following. Do you actually believe what you're saying? Kate's face had shifted. I couldn't understand what was happening. I never thought you were brilliant, but this is ridiculous. There are some huge inconsistencies with everything you just said, but what's gotten into you? Instead of replying, he looked at Erina. Upon seeing that she didn't immediately corroborate his story, he breathed faintly to keep calm. I'm serious, tell me, did you just think all about this and come here thinking that you'd crack the mystery? I discarded a few theories earlier because they relied on you being completely brainless, but now I should reconsider them. Once again, he decided to remain quiet. Then he retraced his steps and looked through the hatch. My perception of him had been changing as time advanced, but it had suddenly taken a significant turn. I still hadn't processed a few things he'd said.
What the hell? That son of a bitch!
It was time to stand up. I moved first since Kate had forcefully changed my mood. I walked up to him and, ignoring his awkwardly placed body, I kneeled down, trying to understand what he was looking at. What? There's no way. Sai and Akro weren't there. From the hatch, I could see the entire lower partition devoid of any human presence. Where are they? They couldn't have left. I went down the ladder. They weren't in a wardrobe or under the bed. Countless questions hammered from inside my head, but I immediately went to check the door. The chain isn't set. I said that out loud to inform the others who still remained upstairs. I attempted to get the door open, but it was still locked in place.
I don't get it. How did they do it?
Well, I'm not surprised you don't get it. It must have been 15:30. I doubted we'd been in the bedroom for more than 25 minutes. No matter what had happened, it was clear that a relaxing time wasn't what awaited us.
At first, Sai began telling me that you'd threatened him and went into detail saying how you'd managed to accomplish everything. I didn't believe him at all, but he started to make some compelling arguments. It was Sai though, so I didn't take him seriously. However, even though Akuro had been looking at him with skepticism from the start, after a while he confirmed Sai's story and gave us his version. He said you'd threatened him too, and that Erina had fallen victim as well. I'm sorry, but at that time everything was pieced together, and I truly believed them.
This is too much. You're saying that they escaped after you went through the hatch?
I don't know how, but yes.
I had no idea what was happening. Leaving should have been impossible, let alone in such a short time. Both of them must have wanted you to go up so they could leave without being seen. And your stupidity was the perfect base for that to work, like flour in a cake. Maybe the lock could be forced with something like a card, but it would take a long time. There's no way they could have escaped in less than a minute. Unless they had access to another Sekimeiya. The chain isn't set, so they definitely left through the door. Well, I mean, no. They could just remove the chain and then just leave through another means. Would we not have heard if they'd forced it open? Maybe it was removed as a trick to make us think they used the door. I hated that feeling. We'd been shoved into another mystery without solving anything, and Sai's plan had worked. Additionally, it appeared that Akuro had worked with him to create a story in which I'd been the main culprit. We would have left eventually, but the notion that nobody would be able to go back to the past if we stayed there was already obsolete. It had become possible for Sai and Akuro to appear in the past if that was part of their intent. Even though Erina hadn't reacted strongly, there was an important implication. Sai and Akuro had worked together, so they could have orchestrated the recording if they'd worked with Isla and threatened her. Does it even matter? This is the logic Sai used when Shiri and I left the attic. If something happens, it'll be their fault. Can we not apply it now? Admittedly, I was tired and my body demanded me to sleep again.
You're crazy. They played us like this.
They played you. Do you want to break the door open? We agreed to stay here until the police come, and now we've learned who the culprits were. They must have had a goal in mind, and it's very likely they accomplished it already. You can go search for them if you think that'll do anything. I was exhausted. I let my body fall onto the bed at my side and disconnected from the conversation. Kate began knocking on the door and yelling. I didn't know what to think, as I couldn't bring myself to completely trust his story. If everything was as he'd said, even though Sai and Akuro would have managed to escape, they would have clearly communicated that they had ulterior motives, which they'd managed to keep mostly hidden until that point. However, that might have also indicated how much they'd needed to get out.
Sure, we tried to leave. They were probably hoping we'd still stay here after they escaped, which is why they blatantly did so.
I don't want to. I'm not sure what Akuro's deal is, but if Sai had been the only one to escape, I would have thought that his motive was to make us chase after him to undo the bedroom lock. If they're still in the tower, there's not much they can do. They can go to the past or hide the Sekimeiya, but they'd still be trapped in here. Even if they went far back enough to exit the tower, there's still no reason for us to chase them. What are the odds of them just sitting under the bed?
But what if one of them had the handle for the hidden exit? They could exit with the Sekimeiya.
Then they're already gone. However, if they could open it, they would have done that earlier.
They could have figured out a way to open the door after they found it.
Kate sighed in exasperation and set the chain again. The key was outside, so the chain would prevent Akuro and Sai from returning. Why is the culprit hiding the Sekimeiya if we'll be able to find it? That recurring question felt similar to our present situation. What could they have wanted to achieve by making it out? Unless they wanted to experiment with the Sekimeiya or hide it, the only reason I could think was that they'd needed to go back in time to finish something off. The other question was a lot more intriguing to me. How had they escaped? They hadn't had enough time to break the door open, and there was no way we'd missed a hidden person who'd opened it from the outside. To open the door, the key would have been needed. There was no other way to accomplish it. However, we knew it couldn't have been inside the bedroom. As I thought earlier, the only way to undo the lock would have been by using the key from the outside and then unsettling the chain from inside. With my eyes closed and without giving it much thought, I could reach a very easy explanation, similar to what Sai had proposed before we'd locked ourselves in a bedroom. They left through the door and went to the past with the Sekimeiya. Then they opened the bedroom's door with the key that we'd hidden under the bathroom's carpet. To escape, they had simply pulled the door open from the inside, which would have been slightly open. It was reminiscent of the first bootstrap paradox concept I'd thought of a few hours earlier, and the clean and brief way they'd managed to escape might have been an indication that it was accepted in our universe. However, there was an inherent property of those types of paradoxes. They had no origin. They were closed loops that occurred with no root or motive whatsoever. Their escape method, though, had a real origin: Sai's and Akaru's thoughts. If one of them had thought of the way to escape, the final thing they'd needed would have been the universe's approval. They would have set an intangible origin of the loop, making it fundamentally different from a causal loop. The key to the Sekimeiya cabinet isn't there. What? I'd realized that to accomplish that sort of plan, they would have needed to escape with the cabinet key to be able to go to the past. Upon turning my head, I'd seen that it wasn't on top of the drawers anymore where I'd left it.
What the hell did they want to do?
In short, Sai and Akaru could have attempted one type of escape route. They'd known where the Sekimeiya had been, so they'd been in reach of one of the points necessary to accomplish the creation of the loop. After thinking of the way things would play out, they'd lured Kate out. Subsequently, they left the room as it would have been unlocked. The last thing they would have had to do was travel back in time and unlock the door. If the result of their travel hadn't incited the thoughts, the loop would have had a clear starting point. It also implied they were both culprits in the incident. As we'd known, any culprit must have possessed higher knowledge of the Sekimeiya's mechanics and limits. There was a slight problem. Unlocking the door from the outside might have made a bit of noise. If it had happened before they'd thought of the concept, the loop would have had no origin, as the noise itself would have told them what to do. I couldn't think of a way to circumvent it easily. If the key could fit under the door, their future version could have slid it inside. However, the gap wasn't big enough, or else we would have simply locked ourselves in and slid out of the bedroom. Beyond that concept, I felt that Kate's story was iffy. As much as Sai and Akaru could have conspired together, nothing told us Kate hadn't been in on it too. They could have spent half an hour unlocking the door's lock and then made it seem as if they'd magically escaped. Kate had immediately suggested unlocking the bedroom, making for a simple motive if the three of them had secretly been against Erina's request.
Sai, Akaru, what the hell are you trying to do?
Kate continued knocking on the door, acting accordingly for someone who'd been played as badly as him.
Hey, Sai, Akaru.
Yes, Kate, I'm sure they'll come back if you ask nicely.
Are you not worried at all about what they could be trying to do?
Not very much. If they're the culprits, we're safer now that they left. All they can do is go back in time, which sounds fairly harmless at this point and unavoidable.
You're right there. It's now clear that they were the culprits, so if they come back, we won't let them in.
Sure, so you can stop with the knocking. They have the Sekimeiya, though, so I'm betting they could teleport back inside if they really wanted to.
That's not a great thought to keep in mind.
Kate stepped aside. It appeared we'd decided to stay. Even though Shiryu and Erina hadn't given their input, they must have wanted that too, and were likely dumbfounded by the fact that our self-imposed imprisonment hadn't even lasted for 30 minutes. Synchronized, we all looked at the door, as we thought Kate was no longer in front of it.
What the? Did they come back? Hey, who is it?
It's me. What are you doing here? Without a doubt, Akaru. Akaru was behind the door.
Don't play dumb. We won't let you in.
Wait, who?
What the fuck happened to this handle?
Ignoring Kate's assertion, Akaru began to forcefully attempt to open the door. We understood he had the key as we heard it being turned over and over.
What the hell are you doing? You're not getting back in.
Well, he is. But he was mistaken. After a few seconds of Akaru's struggle, the chain burst out and the door opened. Akaru's figure was behind it, and we saw the key placed in the outer keyhole. That's not a very good chain.
What do you think you're doing? Where's Sai?
Everyone was speechless. The chain hadn't broken, but it had been forced open. It was old, so it wasn't too surprising. Apparently my plan had an obvious hole from the start. Strangely, Akaru wore a very confused expression. He looked at us one by one.
What the fuck? Who are you?
Seconds of silence followed. Nobody knew how to answer, as we weren't sure who that had been directed to. Wait, is Akaro one of the Ashias? Strange thought, but that seems like the only logical explanation that I could think of in the last 5 seconds. If he was one of the people, this tower belongs to, then this is a scene that could be reasonably explained. Where he just, he's, I mean, maybe not at home, but he's in the attic where he belongs. He sees, okay, this door doesn't open. I don't know. There's people inside. What the hell are they doing in my room? And he tries to open it and he's like, what? Who are you? What are you doing in my apartment? Basically, it would have required him to lose his memory or some other time traveling shenanigans that I don't know. But I feel like that would explain a lot of things. Maybe it wouldn't explain. I mean, Akaro was never very, cooperative. I don't think he ever really took part in any theorizing or anything. It still would seem like he didn't really know what was going on previously, which I'm not sure about, but, well, we'll just continue on.
Who, me?
Yes.
What's your game? Are you going to act like you don't recognize me?
Akaro responded by looking at the rest of us, expecting to be backed up. However, his confusion only grew when he realized we found his words to be the strange ones.
Excuse me, why are you all looking at me like that? Where the fuck did this man appear from?
Oh. Okay, so he just doesn't recognize Kate, he recognized everyone else. Okay, that's weird. Okay. Ignore my theory from earlier then.
You will not trick me twice.
Where's Sai?
Sai? I have no idea. He left the room early and didn't come back. What are you all even doing here?
As I saw how lost he looked, I began to take his words seriously. He sounded genuine, but not a thing he was saying made sense. What do you mean? Do you really not remember Kase?
Kase? Is that his name? Where should I remember him from?
He's been with us the whole time. He took a few seconds to answer, during which he eyed me like I'd gone insane.
Why are you all lying? What's happening?
Huh? What do you mean? Out of nowhere, he looked at Shiria, like the rest of us. She was taken aback, as the two of them had barely exchanged words since we'd gotten trapped.
I mean what I said. Why are you all here?
We tried to stay put in one place together. Do you not remember that?
No, I do. That doesn't answer my question, though.
How does it not answer your question? You and Sai escaped and now you came back.
What? That's not true. I didn't escape.
I couldn't quite grasp it, but something felt off about Akaru's behavior. Past his bizarre claims, he seemed more aggressive and his voice sounded more composed. Not only that, but he'd been fixing his gaze on Shiria. Akaro, why did you come back? Do you intend to stay here again?
The door was locked, so were you all waiting here? I'm very confused. What you are is a lying piece of shit. Do you think you can simply come back acting as if nothing had happened?
I don't know who you are, but don't yell at me. I'm not opposed to staying here, but you all need to explain yourselves. Erina moved forward and took the key out of the door. She brought Akaro inside, closed the door and locked it, then set the chain again. Even if the chain can be ignored from the outside, we'll easily hear it if someone tries to force it open again. I was probably wrong before. We should have kept the key inside to avoid all this. I'll keep it with me. This way if Sai comes, he won't be able to enter or let anyone leave easily.
What about Isla? Are you going to get her?
None of us could believe what we were hearing. Had he forgotten what had happened, or was he talking about her dead body?
I don't know what you're trying, but it's futile. You're revealing your true colors by trying to play dumb.
I don't understand anything. I saw that the elevator had been fixed, but how did you all get here? Again, such an ambiguous question couldn't be answered by any of us, since we didn't comprehend its meaning. The elevator? That was fixed a long time ago, and where do you mean?
Here, the Ashia floor.
With the key Naomi had, do you actually not remember that?
Are you fucking with me?
She's not. What's wrong with that?
Well, I don't get it. Where was the key exactly?
In one of her pockets.
But there's no way.
Do you not remember that Naomi died?
Well, no, I mean,
when was her body found? Many hours ago. Akro closed his eyes and took a deep breath. He was as confused as us.
You all lying to me? That's funny of you to say. Wasn't it you who told me that Atsuki had been threatening everyone? Jesus. Excuse me, I never said that.
My head was going numb. I had no way to interpret what I was hearing.
This is ridiculous. Did you all go insane?
If you're being sincere, it's clear that your memories contradict ours. What time do you think it is? Is there actually like a way to travel to the future with the Sekimeiya?
I have no idea, but I don't think it's 1600 yet.
Oh, interesting. Right, that matches the current time. What do you remember beginning at the start of our imprisonment?
Atsuki, please don't tell me you're playing along. He's trying to manipulate us, and this time it's a lot more obvious.
Please, Kate, the intelligent people are speaking.
Shut up. As I said, we stayed put, but eventually you all left. Then when I went to find you, and I heard knocks coming from here.
That's not how it happened. You and Sai were the only ones who left. Do you not remember anything from the time before we started to wait? I understood why Kate didn't want me to humor Akro, but not too long ago I'd considered the possibility that the Sekimeiya could cause memory loss. I wanted to know if that was possible, as it could have let Isla's story occur as we'd imagined it. Also the second Sai thing. If after escaping Akro had travelled through time, that might have been the direct cause of the state he was in.
I'm having trouble understanding what you're referring to. Before we started to wait, we investigated the building and Naomi appeared briefly just to disappear again.
That's not true. You were surprised that Naomi's body was found, but not that she died. Subconsciously, you must have known that, but you didn't remember having found her. Is that so? Are you sure that nothing happened right before we began to wait?
I don't know what you're talking about.
We found a hidden passage in the storeroom and a door that could lead outside.
You can't be serious. A hidden exit. Why are we still here then?
We had no way to open it. Do you really not recall any of that?
I don't, because it didn't happen. There are no gaps in my memory, so don't treat me as if I'm delusional. Say, Shira, is this some sort of trap?
No?
I understand. That's fair, I suppose.
I'm sorry to sound so blunt, but is there a reason why you keep talking to her specifically?
I don't know how to answer this. I sympathize with you too, as I've already said. That's why it's surprising to see you lying like this. You're really saying that this guy has been with us the whole time? I suppose I deserve this treatment, don't I? Why don't you be straight with me then?
Akro, what the fuck are you talking about? You sympathize with us?
Just drop it.
What the hell does that mean? Everything about you has been suspicious from the start.
I get it.
What do you get? Is your plan to drive us insane? Because you're doing a great job. Why won't you answer? Why did you say that you sympathize with us?
Maybe you're the ones who lost your memories and forgot about the time when you told me.
Are you out of your mind? Why the hell would we tell you anything about us? No, I get it. The Sekimeiya must have inserted false memories into your head, right? Is that what you're going to say next?
The Sekimeiya?
Oh, you forgot about it too? That's funny.
I didn't forget about it, of course not. Why would it give me false memories, though?
I wasn't being serious. I was beginning to lose it. Until then, I'd been trying to tackle every mystery calmly, no matter how crazy it had been. That time, though, knowing that Akro could have been lying to us, I couldn't do the same. Was he messing with us and had hinted at knowing more about us deliberately? I couldn't tell if he'd been referring to that.
I could tell you weren't serious, but why did you mention the Sekimeiya?
Do I have to give you the rundown? We found out the Sekimeiya could make us travel to the past, so we locked ourselves up to escape from the culprit who's been using it. Akro didn't answer, but he remained pensive. Since he hadn't objected to the existence of a time travel stone, he must have known about it in some capacity, even if some of his memories had really disappeared. Is there anything wrong with what I said?
Of course.
You don't seem too phased after hearing that the Sekimeiya made us travel through time. However, earlier you didn't mention it when you explained your version of the events, so how did you know about it?
I'm not sure. You're pathetic, Akro. What's your goal with these theatrics? Shut the fuck up.
In the case he was telling the truth, some of his memories must have remained hidden within his mind, as Naomi's death and the Sekimeiya's powers hadn't been received as a surprise. Do you really not remember Kate at all? He works in this building, well, maybe, managing the security system. He told us about all of that a while ago.
None of that happened.
I laughed in frustration. Since we'd gotten trapped, not a single thing had made sense, and when we'd thought we'd begun to have the slightest grasp on some events, Akro had appeared letting us know that we might have been wrong about everything. If touching the Sekimeiya had caused it, we might have ignored an extra effect of the travels from the beginning. What? Isla? Isla! All of a sudden, Erina snapped. Her whole face shifted into the most desperate expression a human could make, and she dashed toward the door, slamming into it. Ignoring that she had the right key and that the chain was set, she tried to pull it open frantically until her motions abruptly stopped. What are you doing? I stood up from the bed, reacting to her sudden change. With Shiria's help, I grabbed her shoulders before she stopped moving, thinking that she might have suffered from a panic or anxiety attack. Before you could see anything else, she crumpled down and started crying. Isla, she's there, I heard her. In a voice distorted by sobs, she let out those words. The four of us exchanged looks, unsettled by that claim. Even though Akaro seemed to have forgotten about Isla's death, he looked confused as well, since none of us had heard anything. She was suffering. I could hear her yell. She's here, outside this door. There, you all hear her too, right? Whenever Erina stopped speaking, pure silence filled the room. After she asked us that, we paid attention, but no sound entered our ears. Yes, it's her. Erina, there's nobody outside.
I don't hear anything. You should lie down.
What? No, there's no way. Even though she said that, her body gave out even further as she understood that what she was saying couldn't be true. She tried to steady herself by supporting her body on the door. I helped her stand back up and brought her closer to the bed. She was forcefully shutting her eyes as a measure to resist the pain. What had happened to Isla might have suddenly rushed back to her, as she would probably remember the trauma for years to come. She must have hallucinated the sound, given how no one else had heard it.
Hey, you don't mean to say that Isla...
I nodded, making eye contact with him. Even though we knew nothing about Akaro, if he was acting disconcerted, he must have maintained a facade from the start and had begun taking advantage of the low amount of suspicion we'd openly thrown at him.
It can't be. She was with us the entire time.
Akaro sat on the other bed and placed his hands on his forehead, staring at his lap. He had stopped questioning us since we had mentioned the Sekimeiya, as he must have realized that we hadn't been lying. Instead, he seemed to be trying to comprehend what had happened to him and why his memories didn't match ours. You remember touching the Sekimeiya after leaving with Sai, even vaguely. Touching the Sekimeiya with your skin makes you travel to the past. You know that, right?
No, stop. I haven't seen Sai in a while, since he left the room, and I haven't touched the Sekimeiya like that either.
It's not true. You admitted to having touched it a while after we found the second Naomi.
I have no idea what you're saying. Please shut up.
I was seriously straining him, so I refrained from continuing. He knew what time it was and didn't remember having touched the Sekimeiya even once. If he was being honest, it indicated that he hadn't traveled far through time. If he had, his internal clock would have differed from ours, and if he'd looked at the time, he would have known it was earlier than it should have been, as he didn't remember the exact moment of the travel. So if his memory issues had been caused by the Sekimeiya, it was unlikely it had been due to traveling farther than I had yet. I'm sorry, but can you leave me alone? I don't feel well, and it's hard to breathe with so many people around. He might not have been aware of how unreasonable his demand was, since he hadn't yet accepted what Erina was going through. His face was identical to the one he'd been making when we'd found him in the bathroom. Maybe he had a tendency to seek solitude when overwhelmed. Erina gave an immediate wordless response in the form of standing up and moving to the ladder, obviously intent on going up. Alright, let us know if anything comes to you. Shiri and I followed Akaro's request too, and Katai, while he maintained an offended expression full of doubt, joined us last. He closed the hatch so that anything he said couldn't reach Akaro's ears.
Asuki, I thought you were a bit smarter than this. Will you really let him trick you so blatantly?
The irony of his question was almost nauseating, but I fought back the urge to object to it. I was in no mood for pointless discussion. He sighed and sat on the same bed as Erina, in front of Shiria and myself. He tried a few positions until he decided to lean back against the wall.
And we need to leave him the entire lower partition so that he doesn't cry. Meanwhile, only God knows what Sai is doing.
Once again, nobody acknowledged Kate's presumptuous and poorly timed jabs. He rolled his eyes, accepting that nobody would humor him. His behavior had clearly changed gradually as time had gone on. While he'd attempted to look composed and firm at the start, he was no longer actively suppressing his anger and frustration. I tried to clear my head a bit. Nothing about Akro's or Enner's recent actions made sense, but I knew I'd be lost if I tried to tackle those questions. Instead, I went one step back as I realized that I'd missed an important detail during all the fuss. Akro was able to enter the room on his own, and when he did, we saw that the key was placed in the outer keyhole of the door. Since later Akro told us that he'd only been drawn to the bedroom after hearing Kate's knocks, it's very unlikely that he had the key on himself. Instead, it must have already been placed in the keyhole and he used it to open the door. This is a solid indicator of how Akro and Sai managed to escape. The door was opened from the outside using the key we'd hidden. Of course, it's always possible they left it there to make us think that, but that seems a bit pointless because they didn't hesitate to leave us behind, openly telling us that we should suspect them. Once they made it out, they must have left the key in the keyhole since they didn't need it for anything else. Outside help was used to escape, and they accepted it by unsettling the chain. This supports what I thought of earlier regarding the looped set of actions they could have fabricated on the spot. They thought of the loop, lured Kate here, saw that the door had been opened, exited through it, travelled back in time, unlocked the door from the outside, and left the key in the outer keyhole. If the universe accepted this, it was a completely viable way out. In fact, since the door must have been opened from the outside, not much else works. It's very unlikely anyone else could have fulfilled that role. If after a while one of us exits the room with the key that Erina has and goes to the past to unlock the door, we'd still be creating a causal loop, as the only reason Erina has the key is because someone unlocked the way out for Akro inside. So if someone will go back to the past to unlock the door, for it to be a cohesive travel, that person will have to be unrelated to our imprisonment, and going back to the past will not have to be a result of our actions after we locked ourselves up, since they're all branching out from the fact that Akro and Sai have left. With how likely it is that Akro and Sai dealt with the Sekimeiya after escaping, the person who will or has travelled through time has to use the Sekimeiya we hid in Naomi's locker, as its location hasn't been influenced by the escape. Lastly, there's a much easier solution, that there was always someone else inside the building that we missed. Just now, Erina acted like she heard Isla outside the bedroom. Even though nobody else heard anything, if it truly happened, she could have opened the door for Akro and Sai if her existence there wasn't in any capacity derived from their escape. I tried to calm Erina down by saying that nobody was outside, and I thought that it was impossible. However, it shouldn't be. It follows Shirio's theory from earlier, in fact. If Isla went weeks back in time, dying in the cabinet must be the final step of her travels. However, she said that her friend would wait for her outside the tower, meaning that right now it's possible that an alive version of Isla still exists somewhere. And we found a door that might lead outside. We can't open it from here since we have no handle to turn, but the story might be different from the outside. Thinking about it, it's technically possible for anyone to have entered the tower after the last time we did a thorough search, so they could have opened the bedroom door. Of course, they would require knowledge of what was going on inside. I was still fixated on the thought that Akro and Sai could have retroactively opened the door by the mere fact of having thought of a causal loop well aligned with the circumstances. If it was possible, it was a very powerful concept to put into practice, and the only requirement was to properly think of what you had to do. I knew I could be seen as suspicious, but I decided to attempt it. Erina, can you lend me the key for a second? Why?
What are you doing?
A slight frown also appeared on Shirio's face in response to my request. I honestly just want to understand how Akro and Sai left. I won't use it.
Then why do you want it?
Because I needed to see if what I'm thinking of could work. Technically, I'd lied. If it worked, I would end up using the key. Is it important? I think so. Okay, as long as you don't run off with it or anything. I'll be back in a second. She gave me the key with her trust. My idea might have been rushed, but that shouldn't have been an issue. Essentially, I wanted to replicate what I thought Akro and Sai might have done to escape. They hadn't needed to have the key inside since it had just been outside the room from the beginning, and they could have used it after traveling. However, if I just managed to leave the room after traveling, I couldn't open the door as the key would be inside with Erina. That wouldn't allow the loop to work, so I wouldn't be able to exit in the first place. Hence, my idea had to be shifted a little bit. I would go down and attempt to open the door. If it was open, it would mean that the loop could be completed. I'd leave, and on the crystal floor I would unlock Naomi's locker and activate the Sekimeiya. It was likely I would go back far enough given how long the Sekimeiya would have been there for. Then, when the time came, I would unlock the door from the outside with the key Erina had handed me, allowing the loop to be created. Finally, once my original self left the room, I'd enter it immediately after having experienced the whole loop. For them, it would seem as if I hadn't gone anywhere. I opened the hatch and went down, a little nervous to see if it would work. Akuro raised his head, but he didn't say anything until I began to walk toward the door.
You leaving?
No idea. If it worked, the door would be very slightly open, enough to allow me to drag it inward. Since Akuro had been sitting on the bed the whole time in the future, I would have to open the door very slowly so that I didn't make noise he could notice. I unset the chain, put 2 fingers in the hole of the door and dragged it toward me.
You need to use the key.
It didn't budge. Could such a thing really not occur? I sighed, slightly disappointed, and set the chain again. Figuring the trick out would have felt like good progress toward understanding the Sekimeiya, so it was unfortunate that I couldn't know the reason why it hadn't functioned. Ignore me. Do you remember anything else?
No, and I won't ever, since I have nothing to remember.
You say so. I accepted his claim and went back up. Did you find anything out? I doubt it. I gave the key back to Erina and sat where I'd been before. I heaved a sigh, ignoring the odd looks I received, and wondered if I could work with the result of my little test. This is really frustrating. There's no way to know why it didn't work. While it's very possible that the existence of this kind of loop is impossible, or perhaps willingly creating one is, I can't draw a single conclusion. There are too many factors that could have stopped the loop from reaching its end, effectively denying its existence. For example, what if Akuro is lying to us? He became cautious of my presence as soon as I approached the door, so if I'd gotten it to open, he might have restrained me if what he's after is preventing us from leaving and allowing Sai to roam freely. That could be why he prompted the 4 of us to go up too. If he'd done that, I couldn't have proceeded so the door would never have been opened. Similarly, what if Sai took the Sekimeiya out of Naomi's locker? Downstairs, I couldn't have used it to go back to the past, yet again placing a barrier on the loop. Depending on what determines the amount of time traveled, it's possible that activating the Sekimeiya wouldn't have sent me far enough to open the door, and that this problem would have repeated in the future if I tried it again. There are many unknown reasons that could have made the loop an impossibility. I recognized another potential reason that could have interfered with my plan, and it had been a pretty big oversight, as it had to do with the biggest difference between what I'd attempted and what I thought Akuro and Sai might have done. Right. When Shira and I traveled from the cleaning room, even though the cart disappeared, it didn't appear in the attic with us, as the bodies we appeared in were most likely identical to how they had been at 1210, when both of us had been in the attic in those same locations. This means that, if I had traveled holding the bedroom key, chances are I wouldn't have appeared with it in the past. Akuro and Sai wouldn't have encountered that problem, since for them the key would have always been under the bathroom's carpet. But no, that shouldn't have been a problem. I could have used one of the handles we left under the beds. There might have been another screwdriver in the opposite bedroom, and even if there wasn't, putting in screws without a screwdriver is very easy. Could it be that wasn't possible because it wasn't part of the loop I'd thought of? Or maybe I just wouldn't have been able to do it without alerting Akuro. Or what if I wouldn't have been able to travel? When we left the Sekimeiya in Naomi's locker, it wasn't working. Perhaps it never started to function again for some reason. Finally, I thought about the most interesting reason why the loop might not have worked for me, and I was reminded of how messy time travel could become in the blink of an eye. We've already been here for more than 40 minutes, and we think that in some way the location we travel to is determined by where we were in the recent past. So for example, it's possible that I would have gone 30 minutes to the past and appeared where I'd been 15 minutes prior. Since I've been here in both of those time coordinates, I would have appeared in this bedroom. Even if I appeared with the key on myself, that would have caused a situation that I never experienced. Going to the past would have immediately changed things, overwriting the way in which I'd gone to the past in the first place. Since if this had happened, the loop would have become impossible, that could have also resulted in my failed attempt. And Akuro and Sai, who'd spent less time in the bedroom and most likely used a different Sekimeiya, might not have faced this issue either. For a few minutes, my mind lapsed into silence. I managed to ignore how tired I was, but the feeling was starting to kick back in. The 4 of us kept shifting around, mindlessly looking at the ceiling or at the walls. We were all powerless, and our lack of mutual trust wore us down from constantly being on guard. I didn't discard my recent thoughts. Acro and Sai had found a way to escape that involved outside help. Furthermore, if the Acro below us wasn't acting, he must have undergone what had caused his memories to differ from ours. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how powerful it would be if you could create loops that ensured your success from the beginning. The culprit we chased behind could have taken advantage of it, making sure that their movements would always work. It's bizarre, but if you understood how the Sekimeiya works thoroughly, you could abuse this concept to a very high extent. You want to cross a hallway full of doors and deadly traps, but you can think of many ways to do it and you're not sure which one will work. With the Sekimeiya, if you could be the creator of causal loops, assuring success in these situations would be a way to use them. You could think, I will try doors 1, 3 and 5 and I'll walk touching the right wall. After I make it across, I will go around from the outside and leave a mark behind the door to displace. If you look where you'll leave a mark and find it, you'll know that arrangement of doors and movements will work. If the mark isn't there, you know you would die midway, rendering you unable to leave this mark. You can keep thinking of different arrangements until the mark appears. Since you'll only move forth once you see the mark, it's an effective bootstrap since the end result is what allows it to happen, but despite being a paradox, there's actually an origin to it. Even though this is an extreme situation, it can apply in any circumstance because it removes the generalized risk associated with going back to the past. Regardless of the circumstances, you can think something up in your head. If it'll work, you see the successful result, and if it won't, nothing will happen. You would be guaranteed to never fail, no matter what you attempt. The killer could have used this method before killing Naomi. If I move this specific way after killing her and I'm not seen, I'll let my current self know by leaving a drawer in the next room open, for example. Another big advantage is that you'd be able to make any move that's currently hard to accomplish by deciding it to occur retroactively. At some point, the killer might have not wanted us to enter a room, however they couldn't go and lock it or they would be seen. Their solution would have been to decide, in the future I'll go to the past and lock it so it's already locked now. This doesn't have to be a bootstrap paradox, but it's fundamentally very similar to what I'm thinking. Depending on how it works, the possibilities could be limitless. There's even a higher step to reach. It's considerably different, but it follows along with a few things I thought about earlier, regarding the date displayed on Sai's watch. Out of the countless examples, could you go back in time, trade information with someone, write it all down and leave it all in a note that you see before traveling through time? You'd read the note and go back to the past. However, since you would already know the contents of it, you'd have no reason to exchange the information. All you'd have to do would be to leave behind the note you'd read so that you could read it before traveling. The note itself would be a paradox that you caused, but was the past truly changed? Was a past in which you exchanged information truly overwritten? Or did it never exist in the first place? If Sai's watch got to 9999-1231 by spending infinite time in a loop, did the past in which the time counted up to that date really exist in any capacity? The final step is one I'm not willing to accept. If you witness a very smoothly committed crime, decide that you were the perpetrator and go back to the past to replicate it. Ooh. The loops until now always had some kind of origin to them, but this one doesn't. It defies causality very firmly. However, what would be possible would be to go back in time, prevent the real perpetrator from committing their crime, and then replicate it by being certain of your success. That's just a way to use a time travel device. The Sekimeiya must operate on one of these levels, the lowest one being thought-up loops aren't possible. If this is the case, Akro and Sai must have received outside help from a third party. Level 1, using a loop they created mentally, would have allowed them to escape on their own in the way I've been thinking about. Level 2 would complicate things, and it's more of an interesting concept than anything. The recorder in Isla's purse made me think there are some possible benefits of staying here for a much longer time, even though at first it seemed incredibly negative. If I found a very important reason to stay, and a method to accomplish it, probably through the security room's computer, could I grab the recorder, go back to the past with it, and place it in Isla's purse for the sole purpose of reproducing everything exactly and to get to the point in which I decided to turn it into reality? That would be level 2. For now, I'll ignore it. Well, would I send the recorder back in time to reproduce everything instead of writing a note that details it all thoroughly purely because I didn't live that? That's ridiculous. Even though level 1 appears to have endless applications, there should be a daunting barrier to cross: the memories of the person who thinks of the loop. The person would always have to work around the past that they remember. Let's say the culprit wanted to kill someone in the event room and then had to choose between hallways A and B to escape. These loops always entail going back to the past. If the culprit had seen hallway A empty after the point Naomi would be killed, later when they thought that they had to create a loop, they'd know they couldn't use hallway A. If instead they'd seen hallways A and B empty, they would have put themselves into a corner and would be unable to create a loop in which they escaped successfully. It sounds a bit crazy. It doesn't matter if they saw these hallways empty if they hadn't looked at them, but they still would have been empty. That's not the case though. That logic clashes with the most important part of this concept, that the origin of the loop is the mind of the person who will execute it. Both hallways were empty. Why hadn't the culprit seen their future self escaping through one of them? The reason is that seeing their escape route would have told them about the plan they'd later think of, and the origin would have disappeared. So one would never see a result of a future loop before having thought of it, as that could induce or highly influence its creation, resulting in the classic bootstrap: they thought of the loop because they had experienced it. If the culprit is operating on this knowledge, that would be a very good reason to stay hidden. If instead they had spent time in front of all the security screens observing what occurred in real time across the building, whenever they needed to make a retroactive move, their own memories of all the empty places would have been the only barrier preventing them from accomplishing it. Of course, this is also because the past can't be changed, so in short, if they observed too much, they would make any future loop impossible, as they would never see a loop in action before thinking of it. What it basically boils down to is that in some instances having a lack of knowledge could actually be far more beneficial than knowing everything. It was a very intriguing concept, but nothing assured me it was applicable. I was still a bit upset that I had no indication of why my plan hadn't worked. Would it work if I could slide the key under the door and wait a few minutes before trying to leave? That would have matched Akro and Sai's circumstances more closely, but it could have led into even more reasons behind the failure. Sai could have taken the key from under the door if he'd been nearby. I wasn't sure what to do or think. There might have been indications of how loops are handled already. Technically, the first time I traveled to the past, I might have created a bootstrap unconsciously. From room B4, I traveled 20 minutes to the past. I didn't know what had happened, so I ended up taking the elevator to the 6th floor. That action made our original selves follow the elevator up, and eventually it all led into me traveling through time. If I hadn't gone up with the elevator, things might have played out considerably differently. We would have remained on floor 4 and everyone else's thoughts would have varied. In short, if I hadn't gone up, it's possible I wouldn't have ended up traveling to the past. Hence, traveling to the past is in a way what led me to traveling to the past. I'm not sure it was a bootstrap, but what's certain is that I didn't intend for it to occur. By traveling, I merely finished up the past that had already taken place. I ceased my thoughts. I was getting dizzy, me too. The minutes had kept passing, and as expected, nothing had occurred. We were facing a dilemma regarding Sai. We knew he was probably still down there, but we didn't know whether following him was what he wanted. He might have intended to disrupt the peace as much as he might have wanted to experiment with the Sekimeiya or to follow along with his bigger plan. Ultimately, we had once again decided to continue staying locked up because of Erina's input. My thoughts had trailed off and were revived by Shire's yawn. The silence had become unsettling, as it had gone on for more than 30 minutes since we left Akro below. Are you guys really fine with this? Kate took my renewed awareness as a chance to question our actions again.
We are letting Sai run free and ignoring Akro's obvious lies. Don't you understand they set this up? Akro is just making sure we don't head down. Why else would he have come back?
Don't you think that if that was what he wanted, he wouldn't have chosen to tell us such a ridiculous story?
Of course I don't. Before they left, they made up this whole scenario where you were the mastermind. I'm betting they thought of this Akuro has lost his memory story precisely to make us think it's too ridiculous to be a lie.
Well, if you want to leave, you're alone on that. We've already decided what we'll do. He glared at me with an incensed look and attempted to calm himself. He didn't insist further before closing his eyes again. I thought he had given up, but not long after he opened his mouth again.
Fine, stay here if you want, but unlike you, I won't let anyone laugh in my face like Akuro is doing right now.
With 3 silent pairs of eyes looking at him, he approached the hatch and opened it. He roughly climbed down the ladder, not letting go of his indignation for a second. We returned our gazes to where they had been, intending to continue letting time pass quietly.
What the hell? What a joke. Atsuki, come here.